Okay, great. So, welcome everybody. I think we'll kick off now. I would like to welcome you all to our CIPS Level 4 Diploma Exams, Strategies and Tips event, where we'll be hearing from some of our recent CIPS alumni. I would like to just start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you from today, which are the Gadigal of the Eora Nation. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us this afternoon. So welcome to our event. I would like to start by introducing our special guest for today's CIPS Exam Strategies and Tips event, Ivy Kuang. Ivy is Senior Procurement and Contracts Lead at the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence. Ivy is an accomplished procurement professional with 20 years of diverse experience spanning procurement and supply chain management, international trade, sales, and marketing. She has extensive experience in the FMCG and manufacturing in the private sector and healthcare and social services in the not-for-profit sector, and is highly adept in procurement processes and compliance. Ivy has a bachelor's degree in economics and recently the diploma in CIPS Level 4 Procurement and Supply. Ivy is also passionate for ethical and social procurement and loves everything about procurement. So we're very pleased and delighted to have Ivy, who was a previous student with Academy Global Study Centre for CIPS and who recently completed the diploma, here with us today to share her insights all about the CIPS diploma exams and what you need to do to prepare. So welcome, Ivy. I might just start off by asking you a little bit about what inspired you to undertake your CIPS study with us as a study centre, and maybe just a little overall summary of your study experience as well.
Thank you so much, Jen, for the beautiful intro, and good afternoon, everyone. So pleased to be here with you today to share some of my experience to help you all to pass the exams and to, have the enjoyment of doing procurement as I have. What inspired me to pursue this CIPS study path was after the pandemic, I changed job to a not-for-profit organisation, and my manager at the time is a big advocate for CIPS. So she actually put me on to a course and gave me the encouragement that, if you want to do this course and this is available. So I did my own research online and what is the best option to study CIPS. So I found Academy Global. So I make a phone call and email connection with Jen. And Jen kindly explained the structure of the course and the ins and outs to me. So I felt very supportive. And so I thought, yeah, why not? So that's how I started this journey. So my objectives at the time is to really gain a structured knowledge base and experience through a chartered institute that could consolidate my previous experience in different sectors and different areas. That way I have a solid theoretical as well as a practical knowledge and skill set to actually equip me to do the work that I need to do in different sectors. So I started this journey in 2022 in about February, I think, and then I most recently finished in November last year and got the certificate recently in January this year. So, and in between, I did change a few roles within the organisation as well as moving to external organisations as well. So here I am today at the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence. But again, my reflection having done the CIPS course is definitely gave me a deeper insight and very solid knowledge for me to actually apply the knowledge in my daily work to help me to better communicate with stakeholders and have better influencing skills as well. And that is armed with solid knowledge. So yeah, I would highly recommend every one of you to pursue this path and do not give up. If you feel sometimes things get tough, but keep going. It will be really rewarding.
Thanks, Ivy. So I might just start off now into the exam, focused questions. What I might ask you is just to explain a bit about how you structured and prepared for your exams throughout the whole study period. So if you could just give us a little bit of insight into what maybe your weekly or your monthly study schedule looked like, including, when you attended our CIPS classes with our tutors, when you did your work outside, completing exercises, preparing for exams, what other resources you found really helpful, and maybe, what you learned along the way as you went through the diploma as well into what was most effective in helping you study.
Thanks for the question. It's really good. For me, it's time management as well as making sure that I have all the resources available and at hand and listen to the guidance and instructions by Academy Global as well as the tutors. So I allocate 2 hours per day, Monday to Sunday, making sure that I use that dedicated 2 hours wisely. So I will go through all the study materials instead, as well as the rewatching the tutorial recording if needed. And during my study, I definitely making sure that I understand the key concept and familiar myself with the syllabus in that particular module and understanding what are the outcomes that I need to achieve here and listening to the advice from the tutor, the faculty, as well as doing my own practice. In terms of the key learning resources, that will be the textbook, the ebook, and also the study guidelines produced by Academy Global. And I use Academy Global's Moodle, the platform, frequently because I can easily get access to the link and to the ebook as well. That helps me to get that structured study and revision underway. I will also make notes and highlight different areas, what stands out for me and what I wasn't familiar with before, and I would actually delve in a little bit more in those areas and making sure that I arm myself with the terminology as well as the crowd jig and all those models that I use frequently because I know that they will be used in the exams. In terms of practice, I will, actively, consciously use the new learned knowledge in my actual work setting to reinforce that learning. So for me, it is hard, 2 hours a day. However, I think without adequate time to prepare the exam, it can be a bit risky for me to actually go and sit the exam without doing the preparation.
Great. Thanks, Ivy, for that really detailed response. And can I just ask as well, and what additional reading resources did you use for your exam preparation? And maybe as a bit of an add-on to that question as well, if you could just talk us through a little bit in terms of your studying technique. I find everyone learns a little bit differently. Some people like using their own flashcards or getting tested by, a family member or a friend on the topics, or some people like to, just go over their readings and rewrite stuff out or do the practice exams. Just tell us a little bit about what you found worked best for you.
What works best for me is to read it out loud. And I read the textbook, I read the ebook out loud, and particularly near the exam time, the 1 week beforehand, I will read out loud the study guides, the study guidelines, the presentation, because I find that they are concise. However, they are all important points that I need to familiar myself with as well. So I tend to read out loud a lot and make a lot of notes, and sometimes I rewrite the concept. And I also use flashcards. I think when using flashcards, that help me to focus on that particular item. And sometimes I'll just cover up the answer on that flashcard question, and then I'll ask myself and I'll read out the question myself or come up with the answer myself as well to make sure that I absolutely understand that concept and I can actually have the knowledge to go into the exam. And in terms of reading resources, mainly for me is the ebook and also the study guidelines, but I also use the CIPS website's knowledge hub, the intelligence hub. Those knowledge or articles are very frequently used by CIPS in terms of study case and whatnot, and they're also very confined because I find that if I look elsewhere, it could vendor off too far. So within the scope, I would tend to stick with the CIPS material, predominantly with the module, with the study guidelines and textbook, and then the intelligence resource to read those articles.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think to one of the questions I think we got from our audience in preparing for this was just around, how do you access previous exam papers, what can you look at? I would really recommend, and obviously if you're studying with us, go to Shri or contact us at our info@academyglobal.com because we can help you and point you in the right direction towards some of those resources on the Knowledge Hub, because it's really important that, as Ivy said, you familiarize yourselves with some of those key topics they talk about because they're highly likely to come up as some of the cases and the referrals in the exam. And the other thing that would be good to know is if you make sure you're across all the exam guides that are provided by CIPS, including some of the practice papers. As I had a conversation with Ivy beforehand, there aren't a huge number of past papers available, but even just to have a look at the ones that are for each subject will give you a bit of insight into the exact style of questions that are likely to be asked and how they're structured as well. Ivy made a really good point around knowing the syllabus as well. What you'll find when you go through those past papers is that most of the questions will all relate to a particular learning outcome and a particular sub area under each learning outcome. So you'll find that it helps when you're doing your study, like Ivy mentioned, with your flashcards and, whatever technique works best for you, whether it's like Ivy reading aloud or maybe it's, getting past papers and doing practice questions, but to make sure that you're across each learning outcome so that when a question gets raised that particularly focuses on one of those, you're really able to hit that question and answer it well. And to that point, there's some other further guidance on some of the command words from CIPS, because that's something you'll want to pay attention to when you're structuring your responses and you're reading those questions as well. And Ivy, I'm sure you can speak to maybe your experience as well in how you'd approach a question going into the CIPS exam as well, particularly around those constructed responses in how you structure your answer. I might just ask you a little bit about, how you approach the question when you first get into the room and read through the questions in those constructed response exams.
Thanks, Jen. For the constructive exams, I really make sure that I allocate my time strictly. We've got 3 hours. However, we need to answer 4 key questions, and they usually are allocated from all 4 learning outcomes. So we need to identify which learning outcome that particular question is. For me, is some people might do it differently, but for me, is I read question one at a time. I don't read all 4 questions at the start because I will be overwhelmed with that all different questions that might confuse myself. So I tend to really focus myself on the first question and the second, third, fourth, and I allocate 40 minutes for each question and make sure that I allocate the first 5 minutes to really read the question, every single word, to make sure that I understand the context and I understand what I'm requested to answer here and how many points I needed to provide the answer. So once I understand that, and I sometimes, as I think, I'll quickly type a quick note for myself. This is learning outcome 2. It's testing the application of procurement process. So then I know sort of what knowledge area it is about, and then I will then structure my frame for the answer, the dot points and the or you can either use bullet points or numbering system to make sure that you actually put all the answers there, and then I use the keywords, what I'm going to say here, to explain dot point 1, dot point 2, dot point 3 and 4. And on that note, I think it's also worth noting that we need to be careful and be vigilant about the command word. And I usually will use the highlight tool on the exam desktop that I highlight the command word. If it is asking me to please describe or please explain, please define, then I will then, do it accordingly. Always make sure to provide the adequate level of details, because, for example, they ask us to explain. We don't just give the definition and that's the end of it. We have to give the definition. We have to give the example. For example, this. And also for constructive answers, I don't tend to wander off too many points, because as the CIPS exam guides explain, as well as the instructions from the Study Centre Academy Global, we should stick to the points. How many points they ask us to provide answer for. If it is 5, strictly stick to 5, because any additional answers will not be counted or will not be marked. And instead, we're wasting our time. And we really need to use our time wisely, because 40 minutes actually go past really quickly. So we need to make sure that we're on point and within the scope of that answer. And for constructive answer, always remember to use the application to link to the study case, the context provided, because from a assessor's perspective, they need to see us, how we apply that knowledge in the real exam setting to actually embed ourselves into the scenario. So we need to use the reference about the study case frequently to make sure that we understand the theory, but we also know the application of the question that they ask us to do, and also to allow maybe 5 to 10 minutes time once you finish refining your answers. Make sure you have a little bit of time to reread your answers and correct any spelling mistakes or correct anything that is not supposed to be there, or edit anything that you forget to put in there to start with. And I usually do it at the very end because, again, I don't want to spend too much time at the beginning and then I haven't allowed enough time to finish the other 3 questions or the other 2 questions. So that's how I normally structure my time, and then do it one by one. I did test it out to do it once. If I read all 4 questions all together, it did overwhelm me a little bit and did cloud my thinking state. So I actually don't do it. I just do it one by one.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. And someone in the chat just asked as well, I think, Samir, about whether the exam time was sufficient to answer all questions. I think you've kind of addressed this in terms of the time management skills. I don't know if you have any further thoughts, Ivy, you want to share just on that in terms of, I guess, allocating and breaking up your time across the questions.
Yeah, to me, it really is critical because, with constructive questions or constructive response, it is open question. So we can spend as many minutes as we want if we want to write a full essay. However, time is ticking. If we spend too much time on one question, that may not allow us adequate time to finish the rest of the questions. And the reality is, if we don't finish the rest of the questions, or we could only provide simple answers to it, we get the mark accordingly, or we don't get any mark at all. So we have to play strategically when we go in an exam room to do a constructive response. They may not be perfect. However, as long as they cover all the points that you need to address, the assessors will take into account that you actually understand the concept, you got the ideas right, you did cover all the main points. And remember, the 5 main points may not be comprehensive, and they know that when they set the exam. There may be 12 points are relevant. So if you hit that 5 points are within their expectation, you will still get the mark accordingly. And again, like your language, try to use concise language. Again, this is highly due to the time constraint that we're not having, unlimited time to construct, a 40 pages essay. So, we just need to adjust that accordingly.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And I think also for people to, like you mentioned in your previous response as well, to not do too much for a question. You might have already answered it, and then you need to kind of make the decision to, I'll move on. Like, I'm not going to keep doing this because, there's only a maximum amount of points you can get for a particular question. If they ask you to do, describe 3 things, you don't want to be going on about 5 and then missing out on time you could be spending on another question. So you've got to be a bit strategic when you're planning out your responses and how you structure your questions. Someone else just asked as well about how many questions are in the constructive response exam, which I'm pretty sure are,
usually it's 4.
yeah, because they usually cover across all the learning
modules.
outcome. Yeah, exactly. So it's likely to be 4. And like I said before, when you're doing your review, you'll find when you look at the past paper, they reference the learning outcome that each question's related to. So I'd recommend that you strongly structure your study based on those learning outcomes. So because that's the only place that the questions can be drawn from. And I think Ivy made the point too about sometimes when you look things up on Google or you go to external resources apart from the CIPS material for your studying, just be aware you don't want to go too far off what's actually in the syllabus, because the only thing you will be tested on in the diploma is what's in the CIPS syllabus. So you really need to make sure you're familiar with that and you're not, taking into account any conflicting information that may bring you down in the exam, because the questions will be related to particular learning outcomes. You really need to make sure you're hitting the mark in terms of what they're looking for.
Yeah, good point. And I think it's also worth noting that sometimes those 4 main questions, they might have a split questions under each one. So it happens before, like part A and then part B. However, they are related to the same learning outcome. So that's how we regard it, as 4 main questions, but each question may have split questions.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. So I might move on now to from more on the exam content and study preparation into, I guess, the general admin and IT preparation that's required. Obviously, when people sit these remotely invigilated exams for the first time, it's often your first time sitting, an exam in a while, and then to have it computer-based and remotely invigilated, it can often be quite overwhelming. So Ivy, I might just ask you to talk
Mm.
through, what it looks like when you sit the exam, what you'd recommend in terms of getting everything ready and prepared in terms of your space, your logins, or your technology requirements, whatnot as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Yeah, definitely that's important, the admin part. And first of all, you need to check all your confirmation emails coming from Academy Global as well as CIPS to confirm you're definitely booked in for the particular exam. Check all the details, the time, the session, and the date. Sometimes CIPS can get it wrong, and they did get it wrong. So I experienced it a few times. But in that situation, always remain calm because you may not be the only one that got it wrong. So what the right thing to do is check everything, and if you notice any discrepancy, raise it with Academy Global. Sri is so helpful, and so is Jen as well. So always let them know, and then they will liaise with CIPS to get it right. Check your test rich session, the day and time, and your name. Sometimes even your CIPS membership number as well to make sure everything aligns, and you block out your calendar to remind yourself and prepare yourself for the exam, for the room. And during the exam setting, you always need to log in 30 minutes before the actual exam starting time, and that is to allow the setup with the invigilator to allow that connection to happen. So always in the background, keep that in your mind that you need to make sure your device is up to date. Technically, it works fine, and everything is okay, and you use the right devices because you will need to use your computer or your laptop as well as another device to put on the or near the back of your head so that they can actually see the three-way monitoring as well as using your website's webcam, and they will use the other device to connect it with you and see the surrounding of your room as well. And in terms of your room surrounding, make sure it is a dedicated quiet space and without any interruption, and also make sure that there's nothing on the desk that is relevant to your exam knowledge that you might be perceived as cheating. So definitely no paper around and no unnecessary item around. And the good thing is always to prepare a glass of water. You're not allowed to have any juice or anything, but a glass of water will come in handy during the exam time because that will give you some calmness and also make yourself hydrated. It's from a physical well-being perspective as well, and make sure that you eat well, you sleep well the night before. And during the 30 minutes invigilation setup time, just beware that you may not always be the first one to be caught up to be checked first. Even you lock in, 30 minutes beforehand, because the invigilator might have a few candidates all together. They can choose which one they choose to set up first to verify their ID. So you need to get your driver license ready, and you need to print out your or the screenshot of your exam confirmation for the session, for the time, for the module. So then the invigilator will verify. So once that is done, then you can sit quietly, meditate and prepare yourself for the real exam environment. So absolutely patience and calmness are key. So no matter what situation happens, you need to deal with it. And the invigilator, they are quite helpful as well. They have the tech support team in the background to help you if you experience some technical issue. For example, they can't get access to your other device to see what you're doing from the back of your head, then sometimes it may just be a setting on your iPhone or Android phone that you have the security setting on that they can't actually access your phone. So you need to remove that setting for the time being for this exam, and then they can see your session. So that's a really technical tip. I experienced all this before, so it will be handy for you to know if it happens, how to do that, and always stay calm. Their support team is very helpful as well. Hopefully I haven't missed anything, Jen.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think someone just mentioned about SIPs getting it wrong, and I can speak to this sometimes as well too. You will receive the email with the login details, the application you need to download for VictVS and TestReach in advance of your exam. If you don't receive that for whatever reason, and I know from my own experience, this has happened to me as well, where I haven't received that email, do make sure you contact, Shree, if you're with our study centre, so that we can help you resolve that. Because, as Ivy mentioned, you want to make sure you have all these applications downloaded and you've tested the system on your phone and on your computer, to make sure you do, for one, have this internet connection, you've got all your login details, you can see the timing for your exam is correct, so it's on the right day and the right time. Because if any of that is for whatever reason missing or is wrong, the support team from TestReach and VictVS will be able to help you. And obviously, as your study centre, we can help you manage that process and coordinate that with them as well. But you just want to be checking, a week out from your exam, so that you don't have to worry about it on the day. Because the last thing you want to do is, be stressed the hour before your exam thinking, oh no, I can't get into the application. And then you're worried about, stuff that you shouldn't be worried about. You should only be focusing on the exam that you're sitting. So do make sure everything's in place. You've got it down, you've got the relevant applications downloaded, you've got your phone, your room set up so that you have nothing there. There's going to be, no distractions. You'll be able to show them your room. You'll only, as Ivy said, had your glass of water ready, but nothing else, so that you can show them. They'll probably ask you to, show under the desks, behind, everywhere. So you just need to make sure that your space that you're in is compliant, and is really just an empty room with nothing that would make it possible to, cheat or be compromised during the exam as well. Something that often comes up is people ask whether they can, have other things like food and other things that you can't. So just be aware of that. And I'd hate for anyone to be compromised during their exam. So just be aware, make sure you're familiar. If you're unsure about any of the rules, do reach out to Shree and us at Academy Global, because we can help you and go through, what the requirements are, just so that you're ready for everything as well. Because, as I said, you want to be focused on how you're performing in the exam and the questions and giving it your all. You don't want to be worried about, oh, suddenly I've got to change the room, or, move or go somewhere else, or it's not downloading, it's not running properly. So just make sure you do check all the systems and everything's working a week before your exam, so that you don't have to stress about it on the day. Someone just asked about whether a bookshelf with papers will be considered non-compliant. And my thinking, I don't know, you might know Ivy, and I can double check this. I think because they're watching you, as long as it's not something that's on display, as long as it's not like a piece of paper that's in front, like on your table or your desk with writing on it or things like that. If it was just spines of a bookcase, that's not going to be an issue. It's more if there's something, I guess, visible, or like on a whiteboard, or, on a thing, that it's going to be an issue. And then, yes, for me, in terms of using an old laptop, definitely what I'd recommend doing, because when they give you first access to TestReach, you'll also find there's a practice test that they get you to sit. So that goes through the whole system, so you can check everything's working. I'll speak with Tree, and we can follow up with you separately as well to help you. But I'd recommend you do that to make sure everything runs correctly for you and there's no issues with running that application. But yeah, definitely let's do that before the exam. Just checking any other ones have come through. I guess the other thing that I was going to say, because a lot of people also ask about this, is whether, the study guide and the ebooks are enough to pass the exam, and whether you had any thoughts on that, Ivy.
I think it depends on the comprehension as well as the interpretation as well with each individual. To me, is if I have enough confidence in myself to memorizing it, also as well as understanding of the concept, to me is sufficient. However, for other people, if they think they need to rely more on the knowledge hub information, the intelligence hub, that is okay too. But definitely no more going way outside of these areas to go on internet to Google information. For me, the key information is all in the textbook, in the ebook, and the study guides have the high level summarized details there as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ivy. And then another question we often get, and it's come up again, is if English is not your first language, some students are often really concerned about grammar or spelling mistakes impacting their results. What's your experience been like there?
Well, I do have first-hand experience because English is not my first language either, but I haven't actually worried that too much based on the understanding and the English writing. Um, it should be fine as long as you make your points clear. But of course, we do try to be careful with our grammar and try not to make so many mistakes as well, because ultimately procurement is an important profession. It requires a very high level of communication and influencing skills in real life. So I would recommend us to use good English to respond to the exam questions.
Okay. Thanks, Ivy. Well, I'll give people, if you do have any final questions that you'd like to add in the chat, feel free to drop those in just as we're wrapping up the session today as well. And then if you do have any that come up subsequent to this session, feel free to reach out to us. As I've said, we're more than happy to help you. That's our role as the Study Centre, to make this a really simple, streamlined process for you and help you coordinate the various, stakeholders and parties that are involved in the exams, because it can often be quite a stressful process. I guess, Ivy, I'd also just like to, as we wrap up today, to maybe give some final advice for people who are sitting exams soon, and what you do in their shoes.
First of all, I wish you all the best of luck to do well in your exam. And my first and foremost advice is don't panic. Always stay calm and trust in yourself that, with your efforts put in before, all your learning, it's there. During the exam time, definitely stay calm and think deeper to bring back those knowledge and the information that you have learned and use it in the right place. And particularly near the exam time, I would also have the day off beforehand to actually allow myself to be in the exam setting instead of working through the day before and then take the exam the next day, and also take the rest of the day off as well after the exam to allow yourself time to decompose and reflect to make sure that you're ready for the next module to learn. And yeah, trust yourself, the exam paper that you've done before and the learning, and also important to revisit or revise all your materials as well as rewatch the tutorial recording. I personally find that very helpful to rewatch the class tutorial, because you will actually pick up information you might have missed the first or the second time. But before the exam time, when you listen to the faculty or the tutors highlighted points, you will all of a sudden you will click, because after a whole month of revision and studying, you are actually accumulating this knowledge in your brain, in your mind. But when you revisit the recording, you watch it again, it all makes perfect sense for you. So then in the exam time, this knowledge will come in handy for you to use as well. So definitely utilize the experience shared by our faculty during classes.
Wonderful response. Thanks so much, Ivy. I just have two quick questions that just came in last of all, just around whether we need to write the exact wording from the guide. Now, I can probably answer this in terms of, you need to address the question. So obviously the content will be, and the theory is all in the guide around that. So you need to know what you're doing, but you also don't want to just regurgitate and write out paragraphs of text from the study guide. You do need to make sure you're addressing the command words and what the question's asking of you. And Ivy, feel free to add on to that as well from your experience here.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect. I would do exactly the same, because it's hard to actually memorize other people's writing style. It's okay to use your own writing style, but make sure that you cover all the key points and the content is within the line. The assessors will take into account of how you respond depending on your understanding and comprehension. So don't stress too much about other people's writing style, because that's other people's writing style, but understand the structure of the answer to the question, and then you use the same structure. Make sure that it is really clearly listed out, all your rationale and your answers point by point, and to make sure that you don't miss out anything. And it's important to actually use the right terminology as well. sometimes the assessor might give you extra point if they see you actually do understand the theory and the application of this theory. And sometimes using definition of how you're understanding the term, it's helpful as well because that shows the depth of your knowledge as well.
Yeah, that's great. And just one final question, and this relates to the intelligence hub with CIPS as well. Can you just talk us through a bit about how you'd find materials that are relevant to the subject, or how you went about interacting with that material and categorizing it for your studies when preparing specifically for each exam, like the L4M1 and the L4M8?
Um, so that study hub or knowledge hub is on the CIPS website. So if you log in, you have your membership, you log into your CIPS portal and you select that knowledge hub, and that will have a lot of the articles based on the topic, that you need to study it. So if you are studying at Module 1, for example, the overall procurement cycle, then you look under the procurement cycle category and to find useful knowledge. If it is about procurement process, then you look through those articles as well. They usually are like 1 or 2 pages, very concise, good article to read and to learn as well. So that's how I normally do it. I always have a purpose to go in there because I'm learning this module. I need to understand that learning outcome. So I decided to learn more about that particular subject. So I go under that category to look for documents that are related to that.
Great. Thanks, Ivy. And just one final question on whether you found the homeworks and sample exam papers useful in your preparation, which I think you've mentioned a bit of, but yep.
Yeah, I definitely find it useful because application is important. Sometimes, no matter how many times we read the textbook and read out the question out loud, however, it still needs to do the actual exercise, the actual writing. Once we experience this actual writing and actual exercise practice, when we go into exam, we're not going into the exam for the first time to try to attempt to answer the question. So for me, it's more about the familiarization of the practice of putting my own answer down on the paper. That is put the thinking onto paper. So when I go into exam, I do exactly the same thing. Put my thinking onto my exam paper. So for me, it's more familiar myself with the method of how I can draw out information and make sure that the assessors understand my points.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ivy. I think that's been really insightful, and I hope all our participants have gained a lot from that and hearing firsthand what it's like to do the exams. The tips, the advice, I think is just gold. So I hope everyone gets ready and really takes that to heart when you're doing your preparation for the upcoming exams in July. As I mentioned a couple of times, and she's been in the chat as well, please reach out. We are your study centre. We're here to help you with any kind of questions, whether it's content related in your studies. We can help you, connect you to your tutors. We can help you with exam related questions specifically around how to approach your exam and your study. And, if you have any questions specifically around that, we're here to help. And then on the admin side as well, if you need to check technicalities or IT, that kind of thing, do not hesitate to reach out. We're here to support you. We want to get you through these exams. And if you take all this advice to heart, I'm sure, you'll be okay and you'll do well. So best of luck to all our students studying in July. I look forward to hearing all about your results shortly afterwards. And if you do have any further questions, please reach out, and join me once again in thanking Ivy for joining us again today as a recent graduate and sharing her experience today. Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, Jen. Good luck, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.